I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the Bunurong lands of the Bunurong people of the East Kulin Nation. So that's really important for us to acknowledge their elders past, present and future, and to welcome any First Nations people who might be here today. We have the rare opportunity to hear from one of the elders of this community today, Abram Goldberg, or Abe Goldberg, and he's here with copies of his book, Strength of Hope, which has been translated into quite a few languages. Abe will tell you about that later on, and he's got signed copies of his book at the back. Just in terms of what we're going to be discussing today, there are some serious and distressing events happening around the world, but we will be concentrating today on Abe's experiences that he will tell you about. So that's an important point to make at this stage. Abe was fundamental in the creation of this institution. He is still a board member of this institution at 99 years old, which is pretty remarkable. He's 100 in October. He turns 100. In a sense, Abe helped start this museum when he took this document from the wall of the Lodge Ghetto in August 1944. At that stage in his life, he would have had no idea that he would be in this room in 2024 speaking to a whole lot of Melburnians. He tells me, I've spoken to him just now, he did know of Australia, he knew about it from geography at school, but he never thought for one moment that he would end up living in this country. So it's a remarkable story. Those of you today will be hearing a living witness of a period of history, which is a rare opportunity, but you also have a responsibility when you leave today because you become witnesses yourselves. So you become witnesses to a witness. So what we're going to do is that we are going to show you some of Abe's testimony to provide context to his life, and then there will be many opportunities for people to ask questions of Abe.
I was born in Poland, Lodz. My name is Abram Goldberg. I was the youngest of 4 siblings. I had 3 sisters. I was the only boy. My father was born in 1888, and at the early age of year 12, he joined the socialist movement of the Bund. It was the Jewish socialist organization, and till the day he was murdered by the Nazis, by the Germans, in 1942. Out of nearly 700,000 inhabitants, a third of the population of Lodz was Jewish. So it was a very vibrant Jewish community, and all aspects of normal cultural, political life. And this came to an abrupt end with the outbreak of the war. With the outbreak of the war on the 1st of September 1939, it was a Friday, 5 o'clock in the morning, we could hear the first bomb fell on the Lodz hallway yard. And this was the only bombing what occurred in Lodz. And only 7 days afterwards, the following Friday, the Germans marched into the city of Lodz. And of course, immediately, life changed completely. All those laws what were implemented in Germany from 1933 to 1939 applied immediately to the Jews of Lodz. It meant that we were put outside the law. And they did drag us out, male or female, young or old, from the houses for all kinds of work, of course without payment. And usually many did not return late in the evening. The ones who returned were always black and blue for the beatings I received. we had to hand in all valuables. Firstly, all cameras and radios. It was not only what Jews had to hand in, even Poles had to hand in radios. And of course, Jews were not allowed back to the places of employment. Synagogues were burned down. You see, after a short while, we had to put on, they forced us to put on a yellow armband. Only way we could go out was through the wires. And those wires, the barbed wire was guarded by the German Schutzpolizei. And those who guarded the ghetto very often did amuse themselves, took off the rifle and make men or women or a child a moving target. And so just aimed and shot. Many people were murdered that way. Once we were enclosed in the ghetto, life became impossible. The hunger was so great. In 1940, in middle of 1940, the Bund organized the first protest, and people went out into a demonstration in ghetto. A few people were wounded, and we realized immediately that if we would dare again to openly protest, and we realized the consequences will be too great, so we abandoned this part of our resistance. Everything had to be done in a different way. Our resistance had to be different. So as we called it at the time, and today, it's a passive resistance. And our passive resistance meant to encourage the Jews of the ghetto to hold out. So after 1941, when schooling was forbidden, so we organized schooling for children as long as they were in ghetto. In small groups, we organized reading groups. We collected books in small libraries. What was every illegal work was under the threat of death. Not only for the person who will be caught, but families and much more, because the Nazis employed collective responsibility. And so we organized those reading groups, we read the books, we discussed those books, we organized recitals, theatrical plays, our cultural life. And as long as I didn't kill us physically, we never contemplated in giving up. Before 1942, when there was the biggest action in ghetto, it was called the Gesperre. I've lost my entire family then. And as far as I remember, around 50. Cousins, uncles, grandparents, aunties. So I was left with my mother. Before the liquidation of the Lodz ghetto, I was left with my mother. I was then only with my mother. And as I was in the underground, and I was from the people who knew, who were in the know what's happening to us, I went into hiding, and I was able to hide out for 4 weeks. And after 4 weeks, my mother, she was in her early 50s, couldn't take it any longer, because I prepared some hiding places beforehand in attics, in bunkers, concealed, of course, and we sometimes had to change those hiding places on the run. And my mother wasn't capable of doing it any longer. She was emaciated, physically very weak, and she came out with a proposition that I should go on hiding and she will present herself for deportation. I couldn't let my mother go on her own. I was 19 years old at the time, and I did think that maybe when we arrive, and I knew where we're going, to Birkenau, to Auschwitz, I will be able to help my mother. But of course, it was to no avail. On arrival, immediately on arrival, when those heavy doors were flung open, and the scream of the SS, everybody out, men one side, women on the other side, women and children on the other side. And those precious moments, my mother was able to tell me that, Abram, you should do everything humanly possible to survive. And when you will survive, wherever you will be, wherever you will find yourself, you should tell people what was happening to us and what was done to us. Because by knowing, people will be able to prevent that anything like this will never happen again to anyone. And only a short while afterwards, I lost the last member of my family in the gas chambers of Birkenau. When I was driven to the bath, I was allowed only my shoe and my belt. If your shoe were too good, it was taken away and you were given wooden clog. Fortunately, I had very good shoes, and those shoes were not taken away. And this is particularly later on, it kept me warm for also the next 9 months. And I was there for over 3 months. And as I always say, I was in hell for 3 months. You can imagine when you saw 24 hours the chimneys of the crematoriums belching out smoke. The chimneys of, it was terrible, and you could smell the burning flesh, because if the crematoriums couldn't cope, so I burned the people on pyres. So I usually made with us gymnastics, I said, for our goods. And usually so I choose a day where it was raining, it was very muddy. And so I made with us for an hour or more. We couldn't tell the time, but to us it did sound like an eternity. And you can imagine we had to sit down, push-ups, and sometimes even ask us to take off the belt and spread it across our hands, and any belt who fell off will be beaten up. So and this is what happened. How can, when you have a belt across you, a leather belt, it had to fall off. So one who was unlucky and he picked, he had a beating sometimes to death. And then, well, on a couple of occasions, well, we had to line up, so I again choose a couple of hundred, and supposed to be work. It wasn't actual work. So I made us carry stones from one end to the other, on the run, for many hours, and for anybody who fell behind, they clubbed to death.
Hello, Abe. My name is Celia. I'm not Jewish, I'm Catholic, but a very strong Zionist, so I feel very privileged to hear you. I want to come before you, while there are still a few who are still alive. My question is, since you're from Poland, Poland is full of Slavic people who were also, they weren't as traumatized as the Jewish nation, but they were definitely looked down on by the Germans as an inferior race. Do you have any knowledge of, because I just remember reading an account of John Paul II, who was Jewish, and he had to work in a rock quarry at one stage and was underfed and so on, though of course his experience was nowhere near as horrible as yours.
Oh well, it's not only in quarries and all, and other things. I used the Jewish library a lot. And so I established the ghettos in 1940, started to establish ghettos. Well, even before the ghetto, where I did live, like you heard in my testimonies, that We were occupied only a week after the outbreak of the war, on the 8th of September 1939. And then hell got loose. So, well, we were restricted. If Jews had a bank account, I couldn't take out. So I couldn't go to buy in any shops, only in Jewish shops. All those laws, what I implemented in Germany from 1933, when Hitler came to power, till the outbreak of the war, applied to us. Like you heard it in my little testimony. I've got a much larger testimony. And what I want to stress, in 1939, I've written my memoirs, in 1939, in December, on the 10th of December, where we actually lived, this was a Jewish area. Midnight, they surrounded, and we all had to go down. We were given 20 minutes. What we can gather, what can you gather? Middle is practically night, it's night. We were already in bed. Before we dressed, cold was outside, it was already snowing. And so we had to go down. And so it took us not far where we actually lived. It was about half an hour. We could go that by train, by tram. And it was called Radogosz. It was already a camp there, not for Jews. It was the first concentration camp what I established in Poland after the outbreak of the war. And we didn't know what's happening. And to elaborate, it will take too long. Much more, but there will be other questions that will come into it.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Abe. We've got another question here. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Miriam Orwin, and my mother was also Polish. Yeah. And the war started early in Poland, and as I was growing up, she suffered terribly from what we now call PTSD, and this would happen on a very regular basis. One of my psychiatrists pointed this out to me, that at certain times of the year, every year it was the same problems, and I'm just wondering if you would please comment on the after effects of this trauma, in your opinion. Thank you.
Well, it depends. It depends. You had to be very strong mentally, physically, and this didn't mean that you're going to survive, because all of us had a death sentence. It was only a question of time. Not at this time, we didn't know, we didn't expect this. You see, had a death sentence. I survived. I did a lot to survive. And I always say that even what I did, it was luck. It was 99% of luck. Others, people, Jewish people, Polish people, were just by luck, because we had a death sentence. The Polish people didn't have a death sentence, but I had the worst thing what could happen to human being also. The Polish intelligentsia was arrested, priests, nuns, professors. Well, I can go on for hours and talk about it. So, well, we were under oppression. And then, about 1 week before the outbreak of the war, what stunned us is Nazi Germany in the Soviet Union. Stalin and Hitler made a pact of non-aggression. We knew about the pact, but we didn't know about those secret clauses. And in those secret clauses, we learned very quick. Poland was divided between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. And this is how actually our problems began. And I could go on because I will have many more questions, so I have to answer them, but I don't want to tell it in advance what you want me to ask.
Thank you so much, Abe. So you had the luck of staying relatively healthy. It might be worth sharing with the audience how, so you didn't get too sick, but you weren't that large. How heavy were you at liberation?
Even up till today, I never spent a single day in a hospital. This was my luck also. Yes, and to describe how we survived it's not an easy task, because it depends on the person. We didn't know at the time that we actually had a death sentence. The Poles had it terrible, especially the Polish intelligentsia, even the church suffered also. Well, but one thing was Poland never did in Europe. Poland never expelled Jews like other countries. Poland, even there were a time when I invited Jews to come to Poland. This is why in Poland, at the outbreak of the war, was just over 3 million people. 50% of all victims were Polish Jews. Babies, children, women, men, and well, to describe the condition, well, I don't want to give you nightmares. Even when I wrote my memoirs, I was very careful in describing what was possible. And I'm always saying that my survival was 99% of luck. And I was involved in the underground. I did what by being caught, it meant death, immediate death, not only for me, for my family. But like I said, in 1939, in December, we were already deported from the city of Lodz. We didn't know where we would be taken. We were at the first concentration camp. 10,000 Jews were deported, 5,000 to our area where it's called Galicia. And when this was, and we were transported in 1939 in the cattle trains with no food, no water for quite a few days. When those trains, those heavy doors were open, and we were let in, we went to a prepared camp. But this camp wasn't so guarded, so my father, my mother, and my two sisters, what I didn't tell you, and you didn't hear, I was the youngest of 3 children. I was the youngest and the only boy. My older sister was 7 years older than me, and my other sisters was 3 and 5 years older than me.
You're the youngest of 4 with 3 sisters.
Yes, yes, yeah. I was the youngest of the 4 children.
Yeah.
And my older sister, who married just a month before the outbreak of the war, she left with her husband to the east of Poland, but was occupied by the Soviet Union. And she was the only survivor of my entire family. And let me tell you, my sister gave birth to a son in the Soviet Union. By this time, they were good buddies, the communists and the Nazis. And she wrote to us. We could receive letters from my sister. We could write back in 1940 to her till the outbreak with the Soviet Union, the war when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. And she wrote to us that her little boy is sick. We wanted to let her know that we are not so well either. So how could we tell her? Because it was censored. We could only write an open postcard. So we wrote back that we are not so well also. She understood that it must be not so good. And here in this room is now a grandson of my sister.
Great-grandson.
Well,
Great-grandson.
Great-grandson. Oh, yeah. Well, yes.
And that is a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Well,
when those generations
yes.
When those generations continue.
And she was the sole survivor. Her husband didn't survive because when the Nazi Germany didn't keep the pact with the Soviet Union, they attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941. He was drafted to the army. We never heard of him.
Thank you, Abe. We might get to another question.
Yes.
Right? Yep. Thank you very much, Abe. We've got one here. We'll thank you. Try and get both sides of it.
Hello, Abe. My name's Leah Harris. I believe my grandfather was a friend of yours. His name was Boris Schwartz.
Boris Schwartz.
Yes.
Boris Schwartz, grandson here. Boris Schwartz.
Yes.
Tuvia's son.
Tuvia's son.
Tuvia's. Well, we were very close friends. He was in Bund too, in the Bund organization, and he knew me when I was born.
Fantastic.
You see? So we, unfortunately, he died quite a few years ago. His wife died. He survived in the Soviet Union.
I was going to ask you about your involvement in the Bund.
He was not under Nazi occupation.
No.
I was going to ask you about your involvement in the Bund because you mentioned it briefly here and there, but I'd like to hear in more detail.
Yes, and I think, so you've been asked here about your involvement in the Bund, and that the Bund, for those who don't know, was a sort of a left-leaning political party, and was obviously very important to your family and your identity.
Yes. Well, like I say, he knew me when I was born. As a great-grandfather.
So, how important was the Bund to you in your life?
Well, it's still important to this day, because the Bund is continuing here in Australia. And my grandson, my son is here. He's is a leader of the Bund now here in Melbourne. And he went now to Germany to study the Yiddish language.
And Bono Wiener was a member of the Bund, and he was a bit of a leader of yours in the Bund.
Well, and yes, he was a leader of part of the youth movement. He was 4 years older than myself. And we were very close to families. In ghetto, in lodge, because when we came back, where we did live before the war, it was taken where we actually did live before the outbreak of the war, was already taken by other Jews. What was sent from the other part, what was not considered in the ghetto, was outside the ghetto. And the city of Lodz in the war years, and this part of Poland was incorporated into Germany. This part of Poland was called the Wardegar. and actually the Polish language was forbidden. Only the German language was allowed to be spoken officially.
Great, we'll get to another question. Fantastic. So when I referred to Bono, he was involved with Abe in retrieving documents and burying documents in the ghetto, for those who are unaware. So we've got another question, I believe, on that side.
Hi, I'm Rachel Ash. I've got, my late grandparents were from Białystok and from Warsaw in Poland. I would have loved to have been able to ask them now, maybe for the youth in the room, leading up to the outbreak and when the Nazis invaded Poland, what was the youth that were non-Jewish, what was their involvement, what were they doing, how were they treating Jewish fellow youth?
Who you mean, the Poles?
Poles, non-Jewish Poles.
Non-Jewish Poles.
Non-Jewish Poles. I would say it's a majority. Poland was over 30 million before the outbreak of the war. You see, 10% of the general population, like I said before, were of Jewish descendants. You see, of course, they were suffering because I give you one example. It's a city where I was deported with my family in 1939 to Krakow. Over there was a famous university, still today. It was called the Jagiellońskie University. So I said all the professors and all those who were employed there to meet. Once they came, I surrounded it and I arrested all the professors. And the majority of those professors was murdered by the Nazis also. Poland suffered. Of course, there was anti-Semitism in Poland, but we and our political party, together with the Polish Socialist Party, we fought the anti-Semitism in Poland. You see, and with the Nazis coming to power, Hitler coming to power in Nazi Germany, of course, anti-Semitism increased in practically in every country in Europe.
Thank you, Abe. Thank you. One of our students would like to ask a question. Is that right?
Yep.
I'm actually standing actually. Yeah.
Hi, Abe. It's very nice to meet you. My name is Josh. I was just wondering what it was like when you found out that you guys were like liberated when the war was over and like when Hitler died and stuff like that.
Thank you, Josh. So, yeah, Josh asks, what was it like at liberation? You might want to start by telling us how heavy you were at liberation.
Well, liberation came in 1945. I was liberated on the 2nd of May 1945, on 100 kilometers from Berlin, by the American Army. I was 29 kilo in white. I had a mission because when we gathered all those documents, I and my friend Bono, we told each other when we were separated by the liquidation of the ghetto that any one of us who survives has to go back and retrieve those documents. I did survive. I didn't know my friend did survive because I didn't hear from him. But so my first thing is coming to some health, coming some white putting on, and going back and retrieve those documents. This is what I did. And I encourage you, if you want to know more, you have to read my memoirs. Because here, in one gathering, I can't tell you everything. And this is what I did. And when I came back, well, it took me quite a while. It took me weeks. You have to remember that all the railway stations were bombed, railway lines were bombed. Most of the time, I, with a few friends, traveled on the roof of the carriages. And that some carriages were, well, not flat. So, well, and it was cold, was night, and so we knew, I went with a few friends back, so I knew that if we fell asleep, we will roll off the train. So we had before organized what we called it in the term of the former prisoners, a military belt. And I put this belt because on the middle of the roof of the train was an iron bar. And tied it, this is belt, a military belt. And when I woke up, I was hanging. I would have rolled off. You see, and those conditions took me a while. And when I came back to Poland, the Bund already started to organize again. And of course, I met somebody and he told me where, and it wasn't the same premises what was before the outbreak of the war. And I had I met few of my friends who did survive, and my mission was to go in and see what happened to the documents what I and my friend buried. I went, and I did find only one box, because we didn't live in the place where we did live before the outbreak of the war. So where we live, the Poles who lived there had to leave. This we in the Bono's father, mother, and an auntie, but his elder brother was in the Polish army at the time. So we went there and we buried it under a huge tree, very deep. When I came back, there was a big hole, and the box was gone. Over there was the illegal radio. A lot of what we wrote, our memoirs at the time, what of the happening in the ghetto, and it was gone. It was in a metal box, because we could have a metal box, because we were working actually in a metal factory in ghetto. And the box was gone. The other box, we buried it near a Polish latrine. I don't want to describe this because I can smell it even now. Right? So nobody went near it. The other box, also a sizable box, what we buried it. This box I did find. With all those documents, what is here in the museum, yes, and in another museum.
So in a way, that was the genesis of this museum, you could argue, because those documents, those who've been through the museum, if you go to the ghetto section, you can see the original of this document, which is the liquidation notice that went up on the wall of the lodge ghetto.
It was a lot more.
But there was a lot more documents, and you can see some of those upstairs in the museum if you go there later on. So thank you so much for that question. We've got another couple over here and another student as well. So, yep, we'll try and get to as many as we can.
Hi, Abe. My name's Rebecca. I was just wondering, you mentioned that before you got deported, you were kind of aware of where you were, like what was going to happen. In a way, I just wanted to know a little bit about life in the ghetto and like how people understood what was kind of transpiring, and if you guys knew, like how far ahead did you guys know or hear about it?
Well, we didn't know what's going to happen. I didn't tell us. And what happened later, there was never a precedent in history of the mankind that our elected government will establish factory of death where millions of people will be murdered. There was never a precedent in history. So we knew that it's going to be bad. We knew that we're going to suffer. And then the development, we couldn't have any information from outside, but we had a illegal radio. Well, it was done by a Jewish electrical engineer. He was sometimes called to so-called the Kripo. Kripo was the police, the German police, what had the quarters in the ghetto. and to repair electric thing, it's their radio. And what he did actually, when I told him and showed him it didn't work, so he took out also those parts what were good. And he did us, and he threw it in the rubbish bin when they're present. Later, when he returned, he had his toolbox, a big toolbox with a hose bottom, and he put it underneath, and it took it out. Being caught, he would have been killed. And it took us 18 months to be able to listen to the radio, what he was able to do, and what we were able to do in the metal factory also. We could listen into the Polish government in exile in London, and also to the BBC, what they transmit in Polish language, some information. And by the end of 1942, we heard from the Polish government in Polish that nearly 1 million Polish Jews was already murdered. So I mentioned Oświęcim, Auschwitz, inside. Mentioned also Treblinka.
So this news was emerging, but obviously Abe was in a unique position, being in the underground through his involvement with the Bund, making with the radio.
Well, we couldn't come out and tell the people what we just heard. If we would tell it, there would be panic. And the Nazis had their spies everywhere. And how do we know about those things?
Thank you.
So we were not able to tell the people what we actually knew. We knew, but we told them the difference. We told them we had to hold out. We could see the people. 25% of over 200,000 died from hunger and diseases in ghetto. And when we could see these people barely could walk, and so I asked us, so we want to give them hope. So we told them it will not last much longer.
Thank you.
Unfortunately.
Not the case.
Hi, Mr. Goldberg. I'm Jack, and
Hello,
my question
Jack.
for you: what gave you hope in that time, and what gave you hope that you wouldn't give up and keep pushing through that time?
Thank you. What gave you hope? That's in the title of your book.
Well, because I was brought up. Never lose hope in any circumstances. And to this day, even what we're witnessing, and you are witnessing, happening in the world, hope we should always, because we should believe that every country in the world will be at least as good as Australia.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Gabe, we'll try and get through a few more questions. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Great. I've got one over here. Thank you.
Hi, Abe. Sorry. Nice to meet you. My name's Jonty. Come from a Polish Catholic family from Krakow, and so it's lovely to meet you. My question was about the recent pieces of literature in terms of the Tattooist of Auschwitz and other pieces of literature in terms of the growing blurring of the lines between fact and fiction when it comes to the Holocaust. And so my question was, do you have a concern that over time and when our survivors are no longer with us, that line might be blurred further to the point that there is romanticisation and over-dramatisation of what happened during the Holocaust?
Well, this is why our first thought was gather evidence at the time of the war wherever we could. So we did our part. Other people did the same thing. So never in history was ever what happened in the Second World War so documented by the perpetrators themselves. There are hundreds and hundreds of millions documents of those things what happened. And it's described, and you can learn You can learn about if you want to, but you have to look up the right sources, not the sources what will deny it. You see, because there are hundreds and hundreds of millions. So I donated to Yad Vashem, the Jewish Holocaust Museum in Israel, in Jerusalem. Millions of documents. And so I got it in this museum in Israel. The names. And so I asked other survivors to mention and let them know the names what I haven't got from Jewish people who were murdered, and there's no trace left of them.
Thank you, Abe. And thanks for that question. It's an important one. And the Holocaust Museum has a list of recommended texts. But what we say with the students and what they've been looking at this morning is primary source is best. So primary sources, artefacts, which you can see in the museum, and primary source testimony that you've seen today and that you're hearing now, we say is best. So our library is full of actually memoirs written by Holocaust survivors, but there are recommended or fiction texts that are recommended as being slightly better than others, and there are some that are very popular that are not so good. So that's it.
Oh well, yes. Let me tell you. Especially also in Warsaw. Warsaw was the largest ghetto. And when you want to read the history of the Warsaw ghetto, so I especially had units what took notice of every document what I could lay hands on. This which I called on Shabbat, especially against the name. In Ringelblum, a Jewish poet, a Jewish leader, as I established and collected it. They collected it, and it was hidden, and after the war it was discovered. And also, we should not forget, wherever it was possible, in those impossible circumstances, Jews took up arms when it was possible. When the Warsaw Ghetto had the uprising on the 19th of April 1943, we heard it the next morning. It was just the evening of the first Seder, what was Passover starts. The Nazis started to liquidate the ghetto. And Warsaw was different than we, because Warsaw was in so-called, like I said in the beginning, the protectorate. So, because the majority of Poles lived there. And there was a lot of smuggling going on between the ghetto and the outside of the ghetto with the non-Jews. And 25,000 Jews were hidden in Warsaw. Well, later there was a lot of them were murdered. I would find out it's a lot. It's a history of this. But Jews fought back whenever it could, in every form of resistance what was possible, like in Warsaw, in Vilna, in Białystok, and in small places. You see, there were places where in the small towns, where I collected the Jews in the small town, took them to the nearest forest and shot them. And there were the Jewish council in those towns, what, as I said, to provide them lists. So I refused. Of course, I was shot. And this happened a lot, especially in Poland.
Thank you. You might get another one. Thank you. Yes, and Warsaw held out longer than most of the countries of Western Europe, actually.
Yes. Well,
that lasted longer. We've got one right at the back there, and there's another one here. So we'll just do our best because we're coming to a close. So yeah, maybe some short answers. Yeah, let's see how we go.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Gila. Yes, I have an American accent. I was wondering if there's a memory you have pre the war starting with your family that's like one of your favorite memories, and if you could share that with us.
Thank you. Lovely question. Do you have a favourite family memory from before the war?
Well, we were a no Jewish family. My father was involved politically, my mother was, my sisters were involved, I was involved. I was also in the sport club of the Bund, and I became a champion junior gymnast in table tennis play. In those days you called it ping pong. You see, well, those memories are still so vivid in my mind. I never lost those happy memories. You see, well, we had our happy lives till the outbreak of the war, of course. There were a lot of minuses, but there were a lot of pluses also. We were with our families, and in Poland there was a flourishing Jewish population.
Thank you very much. And we've got one more here. Thank you.
Hi, Abe. My name is Rani. I wanted to ask about your journey moving to Australia after you were liberated and what that process was like and how life in Australia has been.
Well, I didn't come immediately to Australia. You see, I was active immediately after the war, politically. I was sent back in missions back to Poland from Germany. And even this happened in 1945. And by the end of 1945, I and my friend, you see, I hope you will read the book so you will be able to know a little bit more. We were sent back to bring out Jewish Bundes from Poland. And this is what we did. Once we came back, and the Bund and the DP camps, what was created by the Allies, you see with those camps, what we call and we did send Bundes with smugglers to Belgium. I and my friend, we said, when they wanted to send us with our smuggler, we said we don't need it. We can go over the borders, what we did so many times, because we go through Austria to Czechoslovakia, and then when we came back, by the end of 1945, I and my friend decided to go to Belgium. And I spent 5 years in Belgium. Of course, there was a Bund organization there. We were immediately active. Even we never become citizen at the time. Now you can become a citizen of Belgium. So we were active. I met my wife in 1946. We married in 1947. We're still married. We are 3 generations of Jewish people. And usually when I speak to students, I tell them, this is mine and humanity's victory. Because with mine is survival. My wife is also a survivor. This is our victory. Our families, we built a new life in Belgium, and here, for the last over 70 years, we spent our life here in Australia. Well, you may say I'm a complete Aussie.
That is the most beautiful note, I think, on which to end, Abe. Thank you so much for the time that you've given us today and for the